Good. Yeah, we got to be clear. Because once I go on that, if I want to look at, as an account still open, and look at that, if I want to look at stuff, I usually use that. My microphone is just like basically it's just me posting pictures that they left, and
getting back into radio.
Especially like now Mike's doing good. He keeps saying this should be a good feature to do. I used to sit and do it like by his computer, listen to everything. Yeah, call right after. So it's like it'd be a good like tribute to. I would love to do it again, but you know,
time.
It's just that we used to do it Wednesday night. Most of the time I'm not doing anything at 85 at night.
It was live.
Yeah, it was through Blog Talk Radio, so it wasn't live. Oh, that's good because I'm not even talking loud and you can hear it pretty well.
Yeah, we're streaming.
So no swearing today.
I have a wireless mic, and I got the adapter, so the wireless mic can go through the receiver and in to get the input to an iPhone. Which is actually a 4-point jack, right? They do send, receive, control, and ground, right? In the iPhone, you may do video in, or send, it's audio in, out, video in, and then ground, right? But the adapter that I have that plugs back into the receiver is a 3-pole, and it's a 2-pole to get it into the computer. So it's like, I can't use the wireless mic. So we use the old Jabra from the Chromebox for meetings. It's picking us up just fine. Okay. Shall we get started?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. My presentation's up. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out early and deciding that this would be more fun than a chamber event across the hall. It's sort of like overwhelming as you walk through. So we have a much higher percentage of food to person than they do. So please, if you want seconds at any point, or thirds, or fourths, or fifths, please help yourself. I also want to thank, we've got a couple of folks online watching the live simulcast. Amazing technology here that we're trying out for the first time today with this session. So I want to thank you for coming out this morning as we want to talk about business continuity in the cloud. Sort of a brief comment about where we sort of came up with this idea is we work with small, mid-sized companies all across the U.S. And historically, we've provided their cloud infrastructure. And what we're realizing is that as people move some of their environment into the cloud and some of it's on-premise, the ability to maintain and the challenges to maintain their business in the event of the unexpected, or what we're generically calling disruption, is even a better term than disaster recovery, and I'll go into that in a minute, is getting a little more complex. And it's complex, a little more complex because you've got data in multiple places and systems in multiple places, both on your laptop, on the server that you might still have in the office, up in Office 365 or Google Apps, G Suite, or in Amazon, wherever. And a little more complex because the nature of the threats and why we need to be able to back up and recover is different, right? And we'll talk about that today as well. I want to welcome Michael from Datto as well. They're one of our technology partners that offer some of the solutions. We're going to show these solutions here today. We're going to have a little bit of fun. I will let you know we're going to pick a volunteer from the audience. It does involve safety glasses and a mallet and a piece of computer equipment. So stay tuned for that. So what we want to talk today is, I welcome you all here, talk about why continuity. And continuity really goes into how do you minimize disruption, what's the impact of that disruption, versus what we're used to thinking about backup and restore, right? Or even backup and disaster recovery. Something bad happens, let me recover. Well, we now know that if your business is fully down or is what you would deem a critical impact for 7 days, there's a 60% chance that in 6 months you're not going to be in business anymore. Because of the cost of recovery and the disruption to the business, disruption to cash flow, etc., it can be crippling for your business. So we're going to talk about some of the new threats we face and why preventing disruption and being able to minimize disruption is just as important as being able to say, hey, I want my data back. And we'll talk about, this term RTO, or return to operation, which should really be RTNO, because it's return to normal operations, right? How quickly can you be back up and running, minimal impact to your business? And we'll look at 3 solutions here today. We're going to talk about backup disaster recovery. That's really a continuity solution, and it sort of comes out of this box in the cloud, and show how if something bad happens, you can be up and running in a matter of minutes instead of hours or even days. We're going to talk about the Datto Network Appliance. Sort of looks like, the communications command center here. And we'll talk about why it's got 2 really cool sets of antennas on it. And we're going to talk about backing up information that's up in the cloud if you're using Office 365 or G Suite, and then plenty of time for questions and wrap up in a second dessert or late brunch. So as we go through, we want to cover the continuity solutions here today. We're covering all 3 aspects of where we operate our businesses, right? We operate on-premise. You still have laptops or computers. You may still have a server or system that you're using as a server in your office. Cloud connectivity needs to be part of our continuity plan as well, okay? So far this year, our office has lost its internet connectivity 3 times. Twice due to weather events, right? That one affected power. One was actually an outage with our FiOS service. And the third was a car versus pole event, which happens, right? And the reality is our infrastructure is a lot more fragile today than it was 20 years ago, in part because it's aging, and we haven't always made the right investments to maintain our infrastructure, and in part because the demand load on that infrastructure is so much greater than it was. So we have to be able to stay, into the cloud. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the SaaS systems and the online console that you can use to manage your data up in the cloud as well. Oop, I lost my. There we go. There we go. Okay. So what's the business impact of disruption? This is a real case study. And there's 3 colors on the slide. It might be hard for the people on the Simultcast to get, but we'll send you the deck as well. There's 3 colors. Blue is normal work. This is the amount of time, or effectively full-time equivalents of a business that's running normally, doing their day-to-day work. The orange is the amount of effort it took to remediate. And this isn't just full-time equivalents, it has to do with the number of hours in a day, because in this case, outside resources were necessary to do the remediation. And the red is the makeup work, okay? And this is the work that you have to do because you were down. And so this company on a Tuesday morning had an event. They had a ransomware event. And they were actually in a meeting when it happened. So they didn't see it for about 30 minutes. By the time they got out of the meeting and realized that critical files were encrypting, and they could actually watch them and see themselves losing access to the files, they were done with their normal work for the day. So they called their IT firm, who's like, shut everything down, shut everything down. So they did. They're now out of business. They're idle. They're standing around doing nothing. IT firm sends 2 techs, right? They were there well past closing time of the business, late into the night, working on remediation. To recover the data, they decided they did have a traditional backup system in place, so they could go to Monday night's backup and recover data, which is nice. But to clean all the systems and recover the data, they were down all day Wednesday. No one got any normal work done. And part of the day into Thursday. And of course, the minute you start doing some normal work on Thursday, you've got to start making up the work you missed. Okay, and as they started working, they realized they still had problems on the network in the afternoon, and there was more cleanup time. And so their IT firm was restoring files that were most critical to the business. But as they're trying to do their normal work and their makeup work, they're saying, well, I need that file, recover that one, and recover this other one, right? And so the IT firm is there working while they're trying to get work done. And Friday, the scenario runs a little bit better. And then to do the rest, they decide to come in over the weekend, but they also had to bring staff in over the weekend to make up. Now you can see that Tuesday through Friday, they lost most of their normal work time. All of that normal work time has to become makeup work to recover, right? It actually took them 18 days. before they had a day where they were full back to normal work. Because every day that there was interference and they thought they had a relapse here, and so they brought the crew in, the IT crew and some staff in over the weekend. Every day that you're not full, you have makeup work to do. So what was the impact on the business? So the outage was less than 48 hours. Not a long time. Most of us, you think, hey, if your computer stopped working for 2 days, could you survive? And you think, yes. It took them 18 days to return to normal operations. So the business impact, there were some tangible impacts. One, there was quite a bit of overtime, so people could do their normal work that's coming in as well as the makeup work. They have a cash flow problem. This disrupted their invoicing cycle, in their collection cycle. They couldn't actually, they were making deposits in the bank, but they couldn't track it properly. And they had to outlay money to their IT firm above and beyond their normal contract for all the repair and maintenance work. 2 people had to cancel vacations. And so the company felt obliged to pay for any lost money and to help pay for rescheduling those trips for those people and the cost difference, because they lost their cheap air tickets and all that other fun stuff. They did lose sales and revenue. They had customers that couldn't get quotes out the door who went to another supplier because they couldn't wait. And what do you say? Well, I'm sorry, we're down, wait 3 days, and I'll get you your stuff. And they had a pretty significant IT labor costs. Intangibly, there was a lot of stress. They had a customer satisfaction issue. The reputation they felt was damaged. Here they'd always been a quality provider. They couldn't service their customers, and people understand. But, they say, oh yeah, we got hit with ransomware. Well, can't you prevent that? It's sort of an expectation now. And they had some employee issues because of the overtime and the weekend work that they had to deal with as well. So a lot of impact to the business for a relatively small option. And what we know is that ransomware and those types of related downtime, that the cost of recovery and the impact on the business is orders of magnitude greater than any ransom you might pay. And the reality is, if you're adequately protected, you don't need to pay the ransom. You can get your data back. But it's time and money and effort, and we'll show you how to short circuit that and make it a little bit better. So when we talk about continuity versus traditional, I'm going to have a backup somewhere off-site, and I'll bring it back if I need it. Making sure that your business is running continuously, even in the face of disruption, is faster, easier, cheaper, simpler. Effectively, it's just better, it's smarter than a traditional recovery model. And so we talk about the threats we face, right? So I don't know, you might recognize this picture. This one's local. That was a thunderstorm in Watertown with a little bit, a lot of wind. But that was 2 blocks worth of utility poles. Okay, so there's a main street there. About 250 businesses lost all their utilities, as well as a couple thousand homes on that, because the impact of that 2-block stretch for days. And we've all seen this. And some of the things we think about, like tornadoes, and I was out in California and saw some of those wildfires happening and businesses relocating their offices physically to get out of the way of the wildfire. We had the big freeze several years ago where some tech communities were without power for 2 to 3 weeks. And here's one, a company I used to consult with in Albany. They were out of their office for 4 days because the business 2 doors down had a hazardous chemical spill. And it was just, they literally were told to evacuate. They left with what they were carrying. Some people actually left their wallets and car keys in the building. And the fire department said it's going to be a couple days, go home. That's it. This whole street's blocked off until we can get this resolved and get this cleaned up. Okay? So it can be something totally beyond our control. But we talk about ransomware and cyber threats. This is from a company called F-Secure. This is a map of all the threats that have come out in the different variations. You can see that if you're in the cyber crime business, business is booming, right? And so you have to keep up. And as good as and we're not talking about it here today, we offer some great protective measures against all of these threats in the way these threats evolve. But again, no threat protection is going to be perfect. So it's not if but when something happens to your business, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's an irate employee, or it's a cyber attack. We know with the cyber attack, 6 out of 7 small businesses, the companies that serve small businesses report they've had customers hit by ransomware attacks. And we've seen it. Jerry and I spoke with a company in the area, they lost 3 years of data. They actually paid the ransom 3 times and never got the decryption key. Okay? And so a majority of small businesses had some sort of attack. So we need CPR, right? This is emergency. We want to keep our business alive. What's CPR? The first is communicate. We need to communicate to our teams, instruct, educate, guide, help them understand what a cyber attack looks like and how our behavior can help or hurt or hinder an attack or prevent it. And it's not just a one-time thing, pass out a memo, do a short presentation. It really is having them understand. Right now, there's a joke that in every company, there's one person who will click on every single thing no matter what. Right? So we got to protect against that too. But there's some smart things, right? So when Paul gets the email that looks like it's for me, that says, hey, this invoice is overdue, pay it immediately, wire the money, right? Since we don't normally operate that way, he's smart enough to say, you really don't want me to send $25,000 to this vendor I've never really heard of, right? Okay, that's good. But we have customers who act, we have one customer who the CFO or the controller didn't realize, and they actually did wire the money. Okay, which of course, they received more of those notices later because now it's standard order of business, right? We want to prevent and protect. So deploy technologies that do more to keep us safe. And we want to recover because no protection is perfect. And so we're going to talk a little bit about recovery. I'm going to hand it over to Michael, who's going to talk about boxes like this that sit on site to capture your data. I'll give you the controllers.
All right.
As well as backing it up with cloud for near instant recovery. And I think we get to play with the
We
tools.
do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Alan. So my name is Mike Diploma. I'm the channel development manager with a company called Datto. So we're a backup disaster recovery company, business continuity solution based out of Norwalk, Connecticut. So about 40 miles east of Manhattan, to an hour and 15-minute drive from here. So what's pretty cool about our company, our CEO is 32 and founded the company in 2007. So he founded the company when he was 22. Started building these devices by hand. And what his goal was to bring business continuity like this down to the small business market. Because we had seen business continuity at the enterprise level for a long time. Nobody figured out how to bring it down to the SMB community. And so we were really the first company to get into that space. If you fast forward from 2007 to 2015, Wall Street Journal gave us $1 billion valuation. So we were the only unicorn company in Connecticut at the time. So we're up over 1,400 employees worldwide, and we protect close to 400 petabytes of data in our data centers. So we've got 9 around the world. We've got 2 here in the States. I'm going to get into the importance of the locations, but we've got 1 in Reading, Pennsylvania, 1 out in Salt Lake City, Utah. But it's one of the largest private clouds in the world. And we have strategic partnerships with MSPs, managed service providers all over the world. Cumulus is a blue partner of ours, which is a top 100 partner. So we've got a great relationship with them. So I'm glad to be out here. So when we talk about backup and where it fits in, Alan mentioned kind of having a multi-layered approach, and he's got some products at the intrusion level to try to prevent these guys from getting through. But these guys are smart. The guys behind this are no longer the guys in their basement trying to make an extra couple dollars. This is what organized crime has moved to. So they are actually as a corporate structure with very smart hackers trying to stay ahead of all the intrusion detection. At the end of the day, your backup is your last line of defense. And what they're relying on is that most people in the small business community are still using traditional forms of backup. External hard drives. We're still seeing tape, surprisingly, all over the country. And then now there's the shift to the cloud, where okay, we're going to back our data up in the cloud, which is great. You've got a second copy of your data, different geographical location. But there's still limitations to all 3 of these backups and really any form of traditional backup that you're looking into. First and foremost, just the higher failure rate. Some of the antiquated ways of backing up data, especially tape. If you read some of the reports on failure rates of tape, I mean, depending on what report you read, anywhere between 30 and 40%. This is a piece of leverage these criminals have. You're backing up your data, that's great. Once I encrypt it, go ahead and try to restore. Right? Who's doing that? And that leads into the testing aspect. And there's a lot of companies out there that are manually actually taking these backups. There's somebody in the office taking these backups to a external hard drive, driving it home, whatever they do on the weekend with it. So as he mentioned, that somebody will click on anything. Also, it takes another step further. User error is real. relying on somebody to manually take those backups and manually test those backups is something that a lot of companies aren't doing. I ask small businesses all the time, okay, how often are you taking your backups? Most people can answer that. How often are you testing those backups? Have you ever tested them? If you're not testing them, really, you have no idea what kind of backups you have until disaster strikes. Slow recovery time, and Alan covered it with that great graph. I'd never seen that study done about how long it took a company to get back up and running. This is their main piece of leverage, especially the ransomware criminals, because they're going to assume that most folks do have a backup solution and that you're not going to lose data. But the reason why most people pay is because they're facing several days worth of downtime. And these criminals will price that ransom payment. They're going to do research about your company up front for the most part. And they're going to price that ransom payment at something that's going to be less than whatever the cost of that downtime is going to be. And then lastly, just risk of infection or theft. If you've got one backup solution on-premise or maybe a mile up the road, you run the risk of whatever happens to your on-premise server. Well, now you have a risk of it being infected, including the backup. So what business continuity does is a little bit different. It looks at backups in a different way. First and foremost, it is a hybrid solution. So you're going to get the benefits of that cloud backup, but you're also going to have the benefits of an on-premise device. So we have some of the smaller ones here. It can fit up to a terabyte worth of data, this little guy here. This is actually the one that we're going to be virtualizing from. And then you have the tower, and then we have rack mounts that go up to 120 terabytes. But it automatically replicates to those 2 data centers. So the reason why that's important is, we talk about cybersecurity, but, Alan was talking about storms. You never know what's going to be the cause of downtime. If it is something that happens to your server and it goes down for whatever reason, well, you've got an on-premise device. They were able to do file level restores, virtualize, which we're going to get into. But if that on-premise device is compromised, you have a second copy of your data in Reading, Pennsylvania, and another one out in Salt Lake City, Utah. One of the pieces of advice I got when I got into the IT world was, whatever you're buying, whatever you're selling, assume it fails. What happens next? It starts with the first layers of defense that we're talking about. You're trying to stop these guys from getting in. Okay, let's assume that fails. What happens? Okay, we've got an on-premise device. We're fine. All right, let's assume that that's compromised. What happens then? We've got a second copy of your data in Reading, Pennsylvania. Well, now let's think of a doomsday scenario where whatever's affecting us folks up in New England is also affecting Reading, Pennsylvania. And I have a third copy of your data on the other side of the country. So multiple copies of your data at different geographical locations is key. The automated solution is really what takes that user error out of things. We're going to set up your schedule for as often as you want to take those backups, and then additionally you're going to test those backups at the end of every night automatically. So you're getting the sense of, okay, I know exactly how often we're backing up the data. It's going to be an aggressive enough schedule for you, and then also testing those backups as well. So taking the user error out of it. The way that backups are taken with a business continuity solution is also different than those traditional forms of backup. Traditional forms of backup, they're usually just backing up files and folders, whatever files and folders you're asking it to. And then the other issue is a lot of times they're layered upon previous backups. So if you are infected with a virus, there's a risk of it infecting previous backups as well. And those backups now become invalid. What an image-based solution does is it actually takes a snapshot of the entire server, and it captures not just the files and folders, but the operating system, the applications, everything. Everything that lives on that server is mirrored to that on-premise device, then replicated to those 2 data centers. And the way that we back up our data, which is proprietary to what we do, is we've got what's called inverse chain technology, which is really a fancy word for saying once you set up that first backup image, you got everything. You set up your schedules for how often you take those backups. All of those backup points are independent of one another. So even if you get an infection, there's no risk of it infecting previous backups. So it's actually like a time machine where you're going to go back in time to your last clean backup, and there's no risk of it being infected. And what this gives us the ability to do, because we're capturing the operating systems, the applications, and everything, is it gives you the virtualization capabilities, which means the example that Alan gave about that business that got hit with ransomware, instead of waiting for the restoration process to start, you could actually virtualize it, be a call to Cumulus and their team and say, all right, I need to virtualize. We'd virtualize that server, and everybody that had access and was working off of that original server that was infected is now going to be operating off of this on-premise device. This is actually going to be operating as your server. And it's a true production environment. You're able to take backups while you're in that virtualized state. And you could be virtualized for several days or weeks while that server is being replaced or that restoration begins, but you don't have to run the risk of having that downtime or losing data, because we're going to be able to get all of those changes back onto that new server or the server that was wiped clean. So we referenced ransomware. I've been doing ransomware presentations for the last couple of years. 2 years ago, if I'm doing one, you see a lot of people down on their phones, a couple of head nods, but most people either don't know anything about it, have never been infected by it, or didn't have any vendors or clients that were. as the years have gone on, I get a lot more head nods. And then last year we saw the WannaCry attack, which now is splashed on the front page of every paper, lead story on every website. What was unique about this were a couple of things. One, it was a single virus that infected 220,000 computers in a single day. 150 countries were impacted. What was unique about it, though, was that they only asked for $300 across the board. I mentioned most criminals are going to try to see what kind of company you are, the size of your company, your location, and ask for the largest amount of ransom they can possibly get. These guys didn't do that. They just asked for $300 across the board. So the IT community came to the consensus that this was just a test. They want to see how many computers they can infect in a single day, and then phase 2 was going to be, yeah, now we're going to monetize it. And I actually was down in Pennsylvania doing a presentation, the head of cybersecurity for the FBI, the Philadelphia office, about 2 weeks after this attack. So he was going through really scary cyber warfare attacks and all the rest, but then he finishes with ransomware because it was the hot button topic of the day. And so he said that FBI's got 2 theories. First one is the one I just mentioned, right? They think that it's just a test. So the FBI is preparing for that second wave that's going to come and really impact the business community. The second theory, though, when he said it back in May, I didn't really put much credence into it. But now, as the months have gone on, I actually think there's some real validity to it. The second theory was these criminals didn't care who paid. The FBI estimated they made about $300,000, which might seem like a lot, but it was estimated that over the last 12 months, over $1 billion was paid to these criminals. So it was just kind of a small portion. And so the second theory was they just wanted to increase the cost of Bitcoin. Now, all of these ransomware viruses that have been occurring over the last 5-6 years, they always ask for the money in Bitcoin because it's anonymous currency. They know it won't get tied back to them. So they've been accumulating Bitcoin when it was $100 for a Bitcoin, $200 for a Bitcoin. And when you look at it, 2016, January 1st was just about $440 for a Bitcoin. Just under $1,000 there in 2017. That first spike that occurred, this is May. This is when WannaCry hit. Because what was happening was these large corporations, mostly in Europe, they were gobbling up Bitcoin as much as they can, waiting for that second phase. Because if anybody that doesn't have a Bitcoin account, it's not as easy as going to an ATM machine or going into a bank and saying, I need to deposit some money in a Bitcoin account. It could take several days to get that funded, so they wanted to be prepared. And once all of these large organizations started gobbling it up, then everybody kind of followed and saw that the price was going up. And we saw these crazy fluctuations where it peaked out at 20,000 and it started the year at about 15,000. And we've seen it come down. And you've read stories about this 20-year-old kid who was smart enough to get in and made $1 million, or the savvy investor. But the folks that made the real money, the tens of millions of dollars, were the criminals who had been collecting money down here. And so the FBI theory, whether it's right or wrong, it did make the criminal community tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars when this thing spiked up. And the other scary part is the players in this really see this business community as kind of pawns. I've been talking about this one variant because it's very unique and kind of interesting, this popcorn time ransomware, which is a little bit different. It will give you that scary red screen, that pop-up that says, pay me my ransom in Bitcoin, but it gives you a second option. It says, well, you can go out and infect 2 other companies for me. You do that, and I'll unencrypt your data. So I've been telling this story, and there's a cybersecurity expert sitting on a panel and telling this story, and he raises his hand and interrupts me and says, yeah, this is scary, and you think that these guys actually, they don't care about the money either. The people behind this, they believe, in the cybersecurity community, are foreign agents, foreign governments that are trying to impact our community and our economy by creating distrust. And we've seen that with the next big one that came after WannaCry was NotPetya, and they already concluded that Russia was behind that to impact Ukraine, but it impacted the worldwide community. So that's even scarier because, as Alan mentioned, just paying the ransom doesn't necessarily get your data back, and the numbers of folks who are getting their data back is actually declining. They don't really care about the ransom payments for the most part. They're trying to disrupt our economy. And when we look at this spike that he mentioned, ransomware's been around since 1989, almost 30 years. And we didn't see much spikes before 2013. So what happened here? There's an easy delivery system for decades, but they haven't been using it. Well, simply put, they figured out that they could marry Bitcoin, which was completely anonymous, with this easy delivery system, and that's where we've seen the explosion. That's where the criminals came in. So the impact of the business community, depending on what you look at, in America alone last year, they estimated about $75 billion. $1 billion changed hands. The impact was much more, and that's because of the cost of downtime and data loss. And so when you look at the 2 pieces of leverage they have, they've got your data, which I mentioned. So if you're not backing up your data, of course you have to pay, or you're not testing them. But they are going to assume that most businesses are. They're backing it up in some regard. So the second piece is this downtime. How much downtime would you incur? Would it be 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks? It's really important just to know exactly what you have and how to answer that question, but this is the piece of leverage. This is the reason why people pay. They're going to ask for $5,000 knowing that if you're down for 2-3 days, it's going to cost you far more than $5,000. And so we actually did this report. We were behind this report. We interviewed 2 pockets of people, the managed services community and the small business community. And so we looked at who was being attacked. And you see the stories that are in the paper that are splashed all the time. City of Atlanta, they were estimated that they lost about $2.7 million. That doesn't include their consultant fees or the loss of downtime. So we're probably looking at $5 to $10 million. These are the large stories that you see, the hospitals, the municipalities, and all the rest. So a lot of folks are kind of believe that, hey, this is just happening at the large level. And there are criminals that are going after the big whales to make big money. But the vast majority of the attacks are actually occurring at the small business level. We probably saw that just a couple weeks ago, right, down in Connecticut, the judicial branch's computer system were hit with ransomware. These are the stories you read about. You don't read about the fact that most small businesses are the ones being hit. Of that $1 billion that changed hands, over 700 million of it came from the SMB community. The average ransomware payment was only between $2,000 and $5,000. So A, that shows you that most of the attacks are happening at the small business level, but do the math and break down $700 million into $200 to $2,000 increments. That's how large this net is that they're casting. And that's how many people have no other recourse but to pay. It's pretty scary. But when you look at what's happening with the ransomware attack, the 75% of those folks that were hit reported business-threatening downtime. Gartner came out with a study that said a small business that's down for a week or more has a 73% chance of being out of business within a year. They'll never be able to recover that. So it's a scary statistic, and that's why people pay. And the reason why they're happy, these criminals, is because of this stat. 9 in 10 of guys like Al in the managed service community are highly concerned because they live and breathe it. Still, after even the WannaCry attack, we started this report in July of last year, less than 4 in 10 small business owners are highly concerned. Criminals love that, right? And so when you look at, a lot of different pitfalls that we're seeing out there, first and foremost, not understanding your risk. That's why we do a lot of these educational webinars and seminars like this. Focusing solely on protection. We talked about the multi-layered approach, and a lot of people make investments on keeping these guys out. But like I said, these guys are really smart. Once they get in, you don't realize that you're really at risk. Not testing the backups, I've mentioned that several times. Very critical because you don't know what you have without that. Not educating the staff. I hope a lot of folks will take some of this information back to the office. Some of the things you got to look out for. Not seeking outside help. Not seeking a managed service provider. It's very hard to handle these things internally and not be able to outsource this to folks who live and breathe this every day. This goes for regulations too. I mean, all the regulations that are coming down, it's very hard to stay on top of things without outside help. And then by not using framework, this is not having a plan. We know what happens in a fire drill, where to go. Do you know what happens when there's a ransomware attack? Most people get scared and they panic and they don't know what to do and they try to turn off their computer. They don't want to admit to their boss, hey, I think I infected our network, and then hours go by. You need to know, who do I call immediately to get our systems back up and running? So I mentioned, I'll give you 2 examples that explain the downtime, because most people do have backup solutions. Most people can take care of this, but cannot take care of the downtime. And so I'll give you 2 examples. One is San Francisco Metro Transit Authority. And we can scale this down to whatever kind of size company you are, but they were asked for $73,000 of ransom. They were hit on Black Friday a couple years ago. They had 2 options. They could either pay the ransom or try to restore. They decided to try to restore. Took them 2 days to restore, and they knew that was going to happen. So they had 2 options. They could shut down the light rail and the bus system. That was the terminals that were being hit, so they couldn't collect fares, or give away free rides. So that's what they did. They gave away free rides for 2 days in San Francisco on the 2 busiest shopping days of the year. So that was a happy story. There wasn't a lot of follow-up stories. They never mentioned how much money they lost, but I could do the math for them. They, on their website, say they provide 735,000 rides a day. They don't break down how many of these folks are riding the bus or the light rail, but I do know it's $1 to ride the bus, $2.25 to ride the light rail. So if they're down for 2 days, they lost anywhere between $1.5 and $3.3 million. Being down 2 days, they could have paid the $73,000. The cost of downtime was far greater. This is the math that the criminals always want you to do. And so I did this. I've been doing this story for a while, and I was in Manhattan doing a presentation with another FBI agent, and he got it up to this point, stole my story. Get up to this point, says, I don't know how much money I lost, but I can tell you if this happened in Manhattan, we'd lose $50 million a day. It'd be a $100 million hit to us. So that's the kind of number that we're talking about. But another example is this utility company out in Lansing, Michigan. I actually heard this story sitting on a panel with a guy who sold cybersecurity insurance. So his pitch was, this is why you need cybersecurity insurance, which is another conversation. But he gave the story of this utility company. They were hit with ransomware. They had a very robust IT team, 51 folks on their internal IT team. They were asked for $25,000. They said, we're not paying this. We've got this huge IT team. We can handle this. We can run it. They tried for a day, realized they couldn't get their systems back up online. So they set up a Bitcoin account, and they paid the ransom. Still, by paying the ransom for the $25,000, they were down for 1 week. So they had cybersecurity insurance. So they put together a claim trying to justify that cost of downtime. They came up with a number of $2.4 million. But after they were looking at it, they acknowledged that $400,000 of that was system upgrades that they needed. They were obviously antiquated. They needed to upgrade it. They couldn't include that within their claim. So their claim was for $2 million. So they send it over to their insurance company, and they say, okay, will you pay it? So the underwriters are going to vet this and try to figure out ways not to pay it. But they justified it. They cut a check for $1.9 million. It was a $100,000 deductible. So this is a third-party insurance company validating that cost of downtime. So the insurance agent was obviously talking about this is why you need cybersecurity insurance. I use it as, hey, this is exactly what I've been talking about, that cost of downtime that's now been vetted by an insurance company. So it truly is an epidemic. So what we're going to show you is exactly what business continuity looks like. This represents your server, and you get that scary red screen because everything that lives on that server now lives on this on-premise device. It's just a quick call to Alan and his team, and we can get a virtualization set up. Everybody that was operating off of this server is now operating off the Datto, and it's business as usual. It's a true production environment. So you're taking away that right-hand side of the screen, that downtime. You're going to reduce it, like Alan said, instead of days or weeks, you're talking minutes or hours to get everything back up online. You're going to be able to answer those two questions. You're going to set up your backup schedule, and I mentioned we test the backups. We don't just test to make sure that the data is valid. We actually spin up a virtual machine every night, bring it up to a boot screen, send a picture of it off to Alan and his team, and say, yes, not only is the data valid, all these cool virtualization capabilities have been tested as well. And you could do it either locally or from either one of our data centers. So if that on-premise device is compromised, we could do it from Reading, Pennsylvania, or Salt Lake City, Utah, and keep your business up and running. I mean, the big test for us was Hurricane Sandy. We're still an emerging company back then, and we had thousands of businesses living out of our cloud for weeks as their server rooms were being wiped clean and new racks were being put in. And so how many of those businesses wouldn't be in business today? So what we do is we eliminate the lost data aspect, but also the down aspect, so they don't have any leverage on you, and there's no real reason to pay. So now we're going to show you how this works. Sometimes we light fires. Sometimes we burn these devices. I've been to a shooting range in Iowa. We've shot the device at one of these demos. But for this one, we're going to select somebody from the crowd that wants to smash this. We've been running this presentation off of this little box here. We're going to smash this box. I back this up to my Siris device, or my Datto device, this little one, and we're going to show you how quickly that virtualization. So who wants to smash this? Somebody's got to take some aggression. Now, it's early in the morning. It's been rainy.
Anyone?
We haven't had a good spring yet. Somebody doesn't want to smash this thing. Nobody wants to smash their IT. All right, let's go. You're dying to. We got nice safety goggles for you here. Probably should put this down on the ground so you don't break this table. We have run into legal issues with some of our things. We set up a fire alarm once, paid a $7,000 fine. We tried then to drill into one, hit the lithium battery, had to pay a fine for that as well. So go ahead.
So I'm really trying to destroy
Smash
it.
it.
Okay.
Smash it. Whoop, you already got it.
It's not working. Okay. It's no longer working. You're
Okay,
good.
good. Okay, good.
I think we got it. Clap your hands.
You got a little smoke out of there too.
There was a little smoke.
So now what he brings over his laptop and plugs it in. What he didn't tell you is he showed the picture of them setting the thing on fire, the computer on fire, which was actually a demonstration. They were down in Sydney, Australia. What he didn't tell you is that flare-up of the computer hit the fire system and the sprinklers went off. And the fire department responded. And they charged for the event.
That was
they sent you an invoice.
I had just joined the teams. My boss did the demonstration. I get to go to Australia. And the fire department came. They let us finish the presentation. They sat in the back of the room. And afterwards, they handed us a $7,000 fine. So I'm thinking, well, we're never leaving Australia. I had to call our CEO on his cell phone and ask him, hey, can we pay this fine or we're stuck here? He paused for a second and he goes, well, did the audience like it? And so we paid the fine. That's what's cool about working for a 32-year-old. So we now kind of pause it back a little bit. So I'm going to show you exactly what this looks like. So this is the portal that these guys can see. So I'm just going to grab this local IP address and open it up, and you're going to see what this looks like. Just make sure we're connected here. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It's going to show you. I mean, obviously, we're not backing up a ton of data on that little device. You could set up your schedules here. It tells you how much data is there. But we're going to restore. We're going to do a virtualization. So if you had multiple servers, these all would show up here. And you could virtualize multiple servers from a single machine if you need to, all at the same time. We're going to do a local virtualization, but as you see, you could do virtualizations in the cloud. And like I mentioned, all of these backup points, we could restore from any one of these. I want to restore from the backup that actually occurred while we were doing this presentation. So I didn't even force the backup. It automatically occurred. So we're going to start the virtualization. And this is what it looks like. If you want to allocate more resources to maybe a server that needs that, you could do that as well. But we shouldn't need that here. So you're going to see it starting it. It's preparing the restore. This is how quickly. Again, we saw the example of it being down for several days to get back up and running. This is what Alan and his team would be doing. And I mentioned that screenshot that we talked about, where we're actually taking a screenshot of the boot screen. It's booting up right now. And you're going to see it in a couple seconds, the screen. And you're able to just click on that. There it is. That's that boot screen. This is what happens every single night. We're testing these capabilities to make sure that they're there. And if something goes wrong, it allows Alan and his team to be proactive, and you don't find out that something's wrong at the worst time when something is hit. So you click on it, and here you see it, right? I'm going to click on, this is the deck that I'm running against. This is Alan's deck. I got some other presentation decks I've saved on here. But in a matter of 30 seconds, this is how quickly you can virtualize. This is obviously a small device, but I will bring it down to the last slide we were on. Get the slideshow back up and running. I'm going to update my PowerPoint apparently, but we should be good. And there we are. This starts at the beginning. But we're able to see that's how quickly that presentation's back up and running. So, and you could do it with multiple servers. And you could test the off-site ability as well. If you want to say, okay, I want to do it off-site, you could do that in a test environment quarterly and say, I want to see exactly how that looks, how the process is, setting up a disaster recovery plan. So this is what business continuity looks like. Got the smash machine. You can take that with you if you want. Put it in your office. You're good. You're good. So that's what we're talking about. That's how quickly we can get up and running. So we're going to be around to answer some questions. I'm actually going to turn it back over to Alan to talk about some of the other backup solutions. But hopefully you can go back to your office, talk to Alan and his team, and see how quickly you can get back up and running. So thank you all very much. And I will pull up this here. We want to bring it down, I guess, to.
I can bring it down.
Here you go. All right. Thank you
Great.
guys very much.
Thank you. So now you can go and say they actually smashed a machine. How did it feel? Did it feel good to get, normally Mondays aren't good days for events like this, but we're thinking that maybe when we're smashing computers, Mondays might be good. And, come back to work, it's Monday. Smack, 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 protect our business and go our way. So we've seen what happens, for your on-premise systems, your workstations, your servers, the whole concept that says it's not just your data, it's an entire image of the operating environment. The whole system is in this box that can be brought up and run locally on site. If the machine's local, if the issue is local to your hardware, that's where you deal with the memory failures and the disk crashes and the fun stuff like that. But because it's also up in the cloud and can be connected to from anywhere, that's where you deal with the long-term power outage, the forced relocation of your business, whether it's temporary, very short-term or mid-term. It gives you that capability to, again, keep your business up and running, your critical systems, your critical data are available to you. Now, the other thing we're seeing more of from a disruption standpoint is disruption of access to the internet and the cloud. And this happens for a couple of reasons. And the end result is either your internet access service goes dark for some reason, which could be and sometimes it doesn't go dark, it goes gray. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And actually something we went through about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago with Verizon that had to do with another company here in Westboro. We'll talk about the impact of that on our business. Or the power goes out. Without the power, obviously, your network doesn't work, right? And so we want a solution for that. And so what we really see is that we have 4 risks. I guess the images on this version weren't fully imported. That's okay. So 4 risks to internet and cloud access, right? Short-term power outage. We all have had that. We've seen that locally. Infrastructure damage. This is bigger events like ice storms and blizzards, windstorms. You know, the picture I showed from Watertown earlier. Regional service issues. And this is one that we don't often think about. And this is one that my business experienced about 18 months ago. And it manifested itself because, you know, we eat our own dog food, right, as the saying goes. So we live and breathe in the cloud, including our phone system. And the funny thing is, for a period of time, every day at 3 o'clock Eastern time, our voice over IP phones would stop working. If we were on a call, we'd get disconnected. And it would take a while, anywhere from a minute to 20 minutes, for the phones to be able to reconnect to the server. We didn't really notice anything else. We didn't notice web surfing being slow, right? So the problem was just enough to disrupt the phones, which are more sensitive than your normal computing use. And so what do? You know, we did all the testing, and we're technology people, so we know what to look for internally. We're like, it's not on our side of the connection. So we get on the horn with Verizon, and they look and they say, well, we can test your circuit, it's up, right? And then we're saying, well, we have to test it, we have to run the test while you're having this problem. So just imagine trying to call the 800 number on Verizon at 2:45 in the afternoon and saying, in 15 minutes, we're going to have a network problem, can you start monitoring? And convince them to do it. So it took about a week and a half to get them to even monitor real time. And they're like, oh, there's something else is happening. So I start talking, and they can't figure it out. And or at least the people we're talking to can't figure it out. Then I start talking to some other business owners who are having the same problem at the same time every day. And then daylight savings time hits, and the outage switches by exactly 60 minutes, 1 hour. It turns out there was a business up in one of the business parks, well, I guess across Route 9, up on the hill there, that they were aware, and Verizon was aware, that every day at 3 p.m. Eastern time, there was a deliberate, targeted, distributed denial of service attack. And that type of attack is where a criminal, or cyber criminal, takes hijacked machines from all over the world and floods a specific network address with traffic. Okay, if you have enough machines, you can bring down CNN.com, right? And all they were doing was pummeling this company's public IP address that gets them into their in-house network with traffic, enough traffic that would disconnect that company from the internet. And the problem is that the Verizon network in our area didn't have enough capacity to reroute all of the traffic on that part of the network for all of the other local businesses.
So the local business was the target of?
Was the target of an attack.
It was emanating from them. They were targeted.
They were targeted. They were the victims.
And was this about 3 years ago?
Yes. Yeah. It's happened more than once.
Because we were
You're nodding
in
your
the
head.
Westboro office park that was experiencing that.
Yes.
About 3
right.
o'clock, everybody's like, what the hell?
Exactly.
Yes.
3 o'clock. Everyone's like, what the heck is going on, right?
I switched phone providers as a result of it.
There you go, right? So this is a regional service issue, right? Now it turns out that the FBI and the Secret Service were involved in this, right? Because of who the company was, okay, and their visibility in the industry they're in, okay. But in the meantime, it's like, what do we do, right? You can have that. And then the fourth, and I gave the example of building occupancy issues, right? And this gets into whether it's weather-related or construction-related, or something beyond your control, like my friend's business in Albany, where they were out because some neighbor had a chemical spill and was too dangerous, until it was all cleaned up for them to go back into their office. So Datto Networking really creates a line of products that lets us remotely monitor and manage your network and provide some other key features. So there's network appliances, which is what this spaceship looks like here. It's plugged in. Don't want to disrupt it. There are physical switches that we can manage for the physical wiring in your office and access points for your wireless message, and a really beautiful web management console that we have access to as well. So we can remotely monitor it. You can have access to the web console as well if you want to get your hands dirty in the tech, but it gives us the ability to do it. And the beautiful thing about the network appliance, this little box, is the reason it has the spaceship, the NASA array as we call it, of antennas, is because there are 3 antennas here that provide you amazing Wi-Fi service into your office. The 2 big antennas on the front are 4G LTE antennas. So what this does is it not only provides a network, edge, router, and firewall which gives you the physical security from intruders that you need to keep people off your on-premise network. It's got built-in intrusion prevention and detection, right? So that if people try and hack in, it'll block them and send us alerts so we can react in real time. But it has cell failover. So if your Fios or your Charter or your Comcast connection goes down, this automatically switches you to a cellular network. And you can run on that cellular network for up to 30 days a year without incurring any additional charges above the standard monthly fee. And so you could have a couple of small outages, or you could have a long-term outage. But the nice thing about this, it also has something for retail and other businesses that want a guest network with a splash screen. It's got that built in as well, which is really cool. It's something the competition doesn't have. So the other thing about this, when we look at the use cases, for every day, it's a great router. Okay, it actually performs, when we look at similarly priced firewalls and routers from other vendors like Meraki and SonicWall, for actually a little bit less money, this has 3 times the performance metrics as far as throughput, number of connections it can handle, number of packets and transactions. So it's a high performance device. Okay, and so you're getting enterprise grade performance in a small business package and price. It's got the simplified guest networks, and with the virtual LAN capability, it makes it really easy to set up voice over IP and make sure that, you know, if you're on the phone and someone else in the office is watching cat videos on YouTube, the video streaming isn't interfering with your phone call, right? And you can set those priorities. Okay. But when it counts, you've got that automatic failover, so you don't lose your internet connectivity. And the best part that we've seen recently, in the recent last year's storms in Florida, I know you guys were shipping these down there to, to customers left and right, is the local area network side always stays the same, right? So I can pick up this box here and move it to Southborough and be up and running, right? So in an emergency relocation situation, the fact that I take this box with me wherever I have to temporarily set up my business or operate my company, I'm going to have access to the internet, even if that new location doesn't have a physically connected internet service, right? So something happens and you're going to be out of your office building is damaged by fire or flood. Hypothetical situation, not that far out of the realm of possibility these days. You're going to move into temporary offices for 6 months while the building gets repaired, or you can get back in, or you decide, hey, it's time to move to new offices. Great, you call up Verizon or Comcast or Charter, and you say, hey, I need to get broadband business service in ASAP. And they're like, excellent. We'll see you in 2.5 weeks. And you got to sign the 3-year commitment, or we're going to charge you $30,000 for the build out, right? But if you pay the 3-year commitment, it's $150. And they play all those games with you, right? But the key number is the 2.5 weeks, or the 3-week lag time. With this device, you move into your new space, you turn it on, it connects to the cellular network, you are up and running that same day. And when the physical connection comes in, it comes in, you go back to the physical connection, you're off the method. And as I said, you get, there's a monthly service fee that includes 30 days, 30 times 24 hours of service per year at no additional cost. And so it provides a great fail-safe. And so we're encouraging our small business clients as they upgrade their firewalls and routers. And what's interesting is we're actually now actively recommending folks, even who've got small business Cisco routers, to change out. One, the most popular Cisco router for small business, it's known as the ASA 5500 series or the 5505. If you have a Cisco router in your closet, it's probably that model. Has a firmware flaw that allows hackers in that Cisco has said they're not going to fix, because it's too expensive and they actually have to replace a chip in the unit to upgrade the firmware. So you'd have to send the box, they'd have to send you a replacement box, and you send yours in, and they send yours back, and you send theirs loaner in. That's a lot of money. What Cisco's saying is you should buy a 5510 and spend more money, right? So we're saying forget that. Go with this. You get the firewall, you get the router, and you get the failover as we head into it. The third area that we want to talk about protecting was protect your SaaS. And yeah, there's a little bit of a pun in there, right? So cover your SaaS. I almost put this up there, right? And it's really about how many of you are using Office 365 or Google Apps G Suite? Okay, a few. Excellent. Okay. Important thing to know is that when Google and Microsoft run their backups, it's for them and not for us. Right? They're backing up their system so that they can provide reliable service. But what if someone deletes a OneDrive file that's versioned or has a drive file stream sync problem? We had a customer call the service desk yesterday with that on the Google side. Leaves the company, deletes a document, or is under forensic investigation. Right? What do you do then? Right? Well, when you look at what Microsoft and Google provide, their backup is to maintain service reliability. And they operate on the shared responsibility model, which means they're providing backup for the security of the cloud that they're running. So if one of their server fails, they can spin up another server and you still have access to your server. As far as what you do with their cloud, that's on you. The tenant, which is you, provides the security in their cloud, which means they're not really designed to protect you from all the human mishaps that happen with your data, technical snafus that happen with your data, or the effects of an outside malicious attack or other form of disaster. Okay? And I've had people think, well, you know, oh, that's cool, right? I've got, you know, Dropbox, and I sync everything, right? And Dropbox, if I save the file on my laptop, it'll sync to Dropbox, I've got a backup. No, you don't. You have a copy of the file on your laptop. Do you know what happens if a file gets encrypted on your laptop with ransomware and you have Dropbox? The encrypted version of the file goes up to Dropbox and overwrites the previous version. And yes, Dropbox business editions, you can pay for a level that has versioning, where file by every individual file you can go back and say, delete the current version and go back to this next version. Oh, that one's encrypted, delete that version, go back to the next one. Imagine if you had 500 files encrypted, which isn't that many. How long it would take to, in each file, figure out the versions to delete and restore from with the versioning. So it's not a valid solution, right? So you have this shared responsibility model. Now, Google will say, yeah, we provide. You know, stuff sits in the trash for 30 days unless the trash gets empty. That's true. Go try searching the trash, right? You can't say, look for resume 321 in trash in Google Drive, right? You can't do it. You can pull up the trash and you can scroll the thousands of files that have been deleted, and they're listed by when they were last modified, not when they were deleted. So it's like, oh, I want the file I deleted this morning, but I hadn't actually edited it for 4 weeks. You're scrolling back 4 weeks to try and find it. Now, Google has a limited ability to recover. I can go and say, give me every file that was deleted on a specific day, so long as it's not more than 25 days ago. Okay? But there's no granularity. You might not want every file that was deleted on that day back. You want the one file you need, right? And so there's little or no granularity. You can't get a single email message back. You can't even get a single inbox back in the Google or Microsoft environment. You need a third-party backup tool. Now, Microsoft actually sells their own backup tool, but again, it doesn't have the scheduling and the sophistication that we see when we talk about Backupify, which is a Datto company, which does cloud-to-cloud backup. And so for G Suite, it backs up Gmail, backs up all your data in Google Drive, whether it's a Google Doc format or a Microsoft Office file that you've uploaded or synced in. The newest version that's in the process of being rolled out this month also backs up the new Team Drives feature for the file server type stuff you have in Drive, your calendars, your contacts, and sites. And you have comparable service on the Office 365 side. Effectively, everything you do is backed up from the Google Cloud or the Microsoft Cloud into Datto's multiple data centers worldwide, and is available to restore. And we get some great use cases out of it, because in the everyday, it can be, oh man, I overwrote this file. Can I get it back? Right? Or I deleted it, you know, I think I deleted this file last month sometime and I shouldn't have. I realized I deleted it by mistake, I gotta get it back. How do you go find it? Or, you know, hey, you know, my Outlook crashed and I need this email folder back, right? Or to clean up my Outlook, I deleted attachments, and this email message had an attachment. Can I go in and back up the email and its attachment and get that restore off backup, right? It also, on a daily basis, lets us archive past user accounts. So when someone leaves the company, we can let their old data sit in Backupify for a cost that is as much as 20% of what it would cost to maintain that account and preserve that data in the system, right? So, for example, in a Google environment, if you're running the business edition, it's $120 a year. We can maintain a past user's data for $24 a year. Right? So it's a lot cheaper way to maintain those archives. And we can export it out into files that you can then keep on a local file server, local disk, DVD, whatever you want. Now, when it counts, when something bad happens, it gives us the ability to do large recovery of deleted or corrupted files. And yes, we've had customers who've had employees start mass deleting things and force emptying their trash before telling their boss that they're going to quit. Right? And we've seen that happen. We've been able to get that data back. We can do the bulk data exports, right? So if you don't want to pay to maintain someone's information in the cloud, you can generate a local copy and store it locally or on another cloud service and have that data export. And we can preserve data for legal matters, right? And then one of the other features that we find really helpful is we can restore data to an alternate user. And none of the Microsoft and Google tools let you do this, right? And so what this comes in, if I have an employee who leaves my company, Google gives me a tool that says, take everything that person owns, all of their data, and assign it to one other person. Now that's great if you replace person A with person B. But most of the time when person A leaves the company, oh, Bob's going to cover this part, and Jane will cover this, and Alice will take care of that. And we hire someone new, we're going to change up the role a little bit, right, to fit with how the organization's working now, right? So Backupify lets me say, hey, these files and email history go to Bob, and Jane's going to get this other set, and Alice will get this third set. So I can take that data and distribute it along who needs it. It also means that if someone's on vacation, you need something of theirs, right? And you can't, because the system's secure, you don't have access to their account and their data. And even in both the Microsoft and the Google worlds, the administrator doesn't automatically have access to individuals' data anyways, right? We can say, oh yeah, we can find the file and restore it back to that user with the right permission. So there's some great use cases there as well. And why we like it, what you also get with the service and with backup and the Datto products in general is 24-hour a day, 365, 7 days a week, you name it, we're there, 24/7, 365 support, quick and simple setup, unlimited storage, right? So we're not going to start charging you more as your business grows. It enterprise scales with Datto's own data centers around the world, and multi-admin, which means you can have access to the system to do your own data recovery and data management, but we have access as well. And for larger companies, you can delegate that admin privileges throughout the company where it's appropriate. So we do have some companies where we have one customer where someone in the marketing department has the ability to restore files for people in their marketing department because IT got tired of doing it because the marketing department kept overwriting images and videos, right? So they said, here, we'll teach you how to do it. You can do it yourself. It's faster, whatever. We have access as well. And so that's the backup, the cloud-to-cloud backup. So at this point, we're sort of right on time. I want to open the floor to any questions that you might have from what we've talked about here today. We've covered a lot of ground. Yes.
Can you dumb something down for me for a minute?
Sure.
The relationship of Datto to Cumulus to Backupify and Datto to Cumulus, Datto Cloud and Backupify.
Okay, so
Those three.
So you are our client for Cumulus Global. We are a value-added reseller and a managed service provider of a range of services. Some of those services come from Datto. So Datto is the underlying vendor. And so our business, we don't build custom data centers and custom infrastructures. It's not cost-effective for small, mid-sized companies. we rely on what are known as public cloud services. So Datto's the vendor that runs the cloud that we use, that builds and provides the hardware, that trains us, that actually certifies us to sell and support their products and services. And they manage it. Backupify is a company that Datto acquired to round out their product solution for both the physical equipment, as we've seen. Good job, by the way. You did.
Yeah, that didn't take long.
You did. Okay. Don't get her mad. As well as the cloud, the data in the cloud. And so we're a strategic partner. We're at the blue level. Just given how much business we do with them and the level of service we offer to our customers as well.
I have a question regarding the cloud. Is there more than one cloud? I think I heard you use the term private cloud, and I wonder if it's different from the cloud.
Yes. So cloud that's a great question. So what is a cloud? Okay, so there was a long time ago, there was a Supreme Court case where the Chief Justice at the time said, I can't give you a legal definition of pornography, but I know it when I see it, right? Cloud is somewhat the same way, right? There are a lot of definitions of what the cloud is. There are certain attributes. A cloud gets used for a lot of things, some which are technically cloud and some which aren't. It really doesn't matter. The general gist of cloud is that you are using computing resources someplace else, right, where you are paying based on the level of utilization, right? So you're paying per user, or you're paying for the amount of data, or for the amount of processing you use, or other factors that the vendors might want to charge you for, right? So for example, with the network appliance, right? Yep, you buy the device, right? And we install it, and you pay a monthly service fee, which gives us it pays for the system that lets us access and manage it remotely for you, and provides the cellular service so that in an emergency it's instantly available for you, right? So you're paying for what you need, right, and what you actually use. And so for for example, for the SaaS backing up Office 365 in G Suite, you pay per user, and we don't charge you based on the amount of data, right? And the reality is we've got some companies that have 5 or 6 employees who have terabytes of data, and we've got companies with 150, 200, 300 employees, that all of their data, could fit on a USB drive for some reason, okay? And so it's what you pay for, right? Public cloud service basically means a cloud service that's sold to anyone who's willing to pay for it. When you hear private cloud, that's usually when a company builds their own cloud environment with their own servers in someone else's data center somewhere, and it's just for them. And there, it's about scalability, and there's not much difference between private cloud and a remote data center, but private cloud gets funding from boards of directors and upper management, and remote data centers, people are like, oh, been there, done that, no money.
Okay.
It also allows us to allocate resources within our. So if we've got a storm, and now we have a lot of virtualizations taking place. Because we manage the cloud, we could, allocate additional resources to make sure there's multiple servers up and there's no, impact. So like he mentioned, we manage all of it.
Ideally, cloud, when you're using a cloud service, you should have the perception of infinite resource, right? You need more memory, you need more storage space, make a quick phone call, flip a switch, right? Boom, it's there, right? The provider's challenge is to make sure they always have enough capacity that no matter how many of those requests come in, how fast they can meet it. And so they get the economy of scale that we can take advantage of as small and mid-sized businesses. And that's why cloud has really taken off. Because that economy of scale dramatically cuts the cost of IT. And more importantly, brings capabilities to small and mid-sized companies that in the past were just financially out of reach.
Is there anything unique about what you do specifically? There's a lot of unique things that for HIPAA regs and for legal guidelines, is there anything even further that you do to further protect, or is it all? You explained super clearly what it is you do, and it sounds great. Just curious if there's anything.
I'll take this one.
Additionally.
Okay, so both backup solutions that we've shown here today meet the requirements of HIPAA, meaning that the data is encrypted with restricted access and an audit trail of who accesses the data, not only at rest when it's sitting on the virtualized server or up in the cloud or cloud to cloud, but in transit as well. Okay, HIPAA compliance for technology goes beyond that, right? It goes into how you manage user identities to prevent someone from pretending to be someone. It also deals a lot with how you communicate. So as an organization, we do a lot of work with not just medical practices and folks in healthcare, but even small business owners who are covered under HIPAA, right, and have certain responsibilities to make sure. So for example, with HIPAA, you cannot leave, a doctor's office should not be leaving a voice message on someone's home answering machine. Because if you leave a message saying, hey, Mrs. X, we got the results of your text, you have no way of knowing if Mrs. X is going to get that message or if Mr. X is going to come home, and you've just disclosed that his wife went to the doctor and she hadn't shared it with him. And that's a HIPAA violation, where you've shared someone's medical status without their permission. Right? So in our world, right, so there's a lot of human behavior that goes into HIPAA. In our world, it's making sure that you have a way, for example, when you're sending an email message, not only to encrypt the message, so individually, so it can't be read by someone who shouldn't read it, but we make what's known as a commercially reasonable effort to verify the identity of the person who actually reads it. So the email encryption tools we offer, the recipient gets a notice that they have an encrypted email, they click a link, they have to set up a user account password the first time. They validate off their phone with some text code or something. We know they're physically there. We have some way of making a reasonable assurance that only the person who's supposed to receive it is receiving it. Okay. Now, most doctors' offices have health information systems that are HIPAA compliant. What happens, though, is emails and other communications get sent outside of that system. The office manager has a quick question for the insurance company and sends off an email with an attached file. We can make sure that that stays compliant and do that. So there's a whole people, process, technology component that comes in.
I mean, we've got a pretty robust legal team, so I get questions all the time about regulations that I've never heard of, so I'll call them up and say, hey, and they, God bless these guys, they know everything. And then we're dealing with Europe right now with GDPR, which is a really, huge,
Yes.
and so, yeah, we're trying to stay ahead of it. The regulations that I mentioned are coming down. New York's got a really strong, they just passed regulation about anyone that handles personal information or financial information, which actually requires a backup like this. And so we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve in that. So it's like, God bless these guys.
Yeah.
I don't know all of them.
And we work with other organizations too, SEC, FINRA compliance. Oftentimes small businesses, if they sell to large companies, will have requirements imposed on them by contract, saying, yeah, you're too small for Sarbanes-Oxley, but we're not. And the easiest way to make sure that we're compliant is make sure our entire supply chain is compliant. So we've gotten calls from companies of 30 people, well below the limit, saying, what do we have to do with our data to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant? Or, they sent us the 27-page security checklist. What do we need to do so we can check yes to everything we need to check to? So it's ongoing. I mean, and even just in general, GDPR is an interesting challenge. Whether you need to comply is all, do you have one piece of data from someone who's a resident of the European Union? If the answer to that is yes, then either never do business with that one person again and delete them out of your system and refuse business,
Sorry, sir.
or put in the protections and the process and have a security officer and be ready to prove that you can delete that person out of your records or anonymize them in a way that complies with the regulation. So it's a good challenge. But even here in Massachusetts, I'm sure everyone's heard of 200 CMR 17, our personal information privacy rules here, where it doesn't take much to hit the threshold, right? A partial social security number and a last name is a breach. And under the Massachusetts law, there's no such thing. Legally, there's no such thing as an accidental breach. Right? So if you are caught up in if you are caught up in a breach, and a victim of that breach sues you, by definition, whatever the jury or the judge awards is tripled, because it's assumed to be intentional. That you're assumed gross negligence if there's any sort of data breach. So scary stuff.
Now, so performance of the system once you kind of jump over to that device.
For the most part, folks in the office won't even know that you're running off of a Datto. That's the speed of it, and it allows Alan and his team to allocate more resources that I mentioned. So once we do that test initially, we want to make sure that the speeds are good, and they're all custom built. So they're right in Monroe, Connecticut. So we would do all of that homework ahead of time to say, okay, how many resources do you need? If we need to add extra RAM, we can do all that up front. But I've got examples of folks that say, hey, I thought somebody told me that the systems were down. And we say, yeah, we flipped over an hour ago, and people didn't even know in the office that they were running off of it. So it's really seamless. For the offsite, it is going to be bandwidth dependent. Again, that's why it's important to test and see what that looks like. We can't really control the bandwidth of where you're located. Luckily, in the Northeast, usually most people have good services. I mean, if you've done virtualizations, have you seen any impact?
We haven't seen any significant impact. People say sometimes it's slow, but there are other things we can do in the environment as far as using remote desktop, where only the screen I/O is actually coming over. And so it is possible to run not only the server in the Datto data center, but the client as well, and remote desktop into that virtual client, so that only your keyboard, mouse, and screen activity is happening. And it's a little more sophisticated of a setup, but for companies that are really bandwidth heavy dependent, it can work. And the realization, again, remember, this is recovery mode, right? And so, a 5 or 10 or 15% slowdown in performance, you can be, maybe it reaches the level of human irritant, right? Because remember, computers work in nanoseconds and we work in seconds, right? It's like a 10,000 to 1 ratio there, right? So, it may raise to the level. We can increase bandwidth if need be. But again, most companies don't see that. In most outages and downtime where we're running in the virtual environment are relatively short.
I would not recommend it, but I have actually run this demo off of the hotspot on my phone. So I've been in situations where I'm in Iowa or something. So I've had situations where I have to run this off of the hotspot on my phone. So it's not bad.
Okay.
Can you guys tell us who your ideal client is?
For us,
an ideal new client profile.
So for us, it's a company of 1 to 350 employees that wants to see better value out of their information technology spend, what they're either doing today or what they think they want to do in the future. Our view is that information technology should show tangible results to business goals and objectives. So an ideal client for us is someone who wants to either solve a problem or improve their business in some way, and we can look to see if the technologies we offer and the services we offer can help make that happen. And sometimes it's really straightforward, right? We have a manufacturing and distribution company up in Hudson. They had 2 facilities, a mile and a half apart. To connect them so that everyone at both sites could have access to their local servers, they were spending $3,500 a month in networking for point-to-point high-speed network between the 2 facilities. We moved their servers into a cloud environment. The direct internet access to that cloud for each facility took that $3,500 down to under $350 a month, covering both facilities. And the cost of running their servers is less than $2,500 a month. So not only are they saving over $500 a month to have their servers in the cloud, but now when there's any sort of incident in one of their facilities, power outage, snowstorm where people can't get into work, their data's in the cloud, it's still running. On the distribution side of their business, some of their large government contracts require them to have a person on site at the remote location, at the government office or facility. And even some of their commercial accounts like Boeing have that as well. Now these people are talking directly to a cloud service at high performance rather than doing a go to my PC and hopping through the phone system onto a PC that's locally connected. And so we've cut their costs, we've made their business more efficient, and made them more responsive to customer. And they could relocate the remote salespeople without having to reconfigure their network.
Just one more point, and it's not even about data, it's about the kind of the work that they do. So we don't sell direct at all. So you asked about the relationship. We always work with strategic partners. And I actually, after the WannaCry attack, I reached out to our support team. We've got about 250,000 devices out. And I said, how many tickets were opened about WannaCry? And I mentioned 220,000 computers. We only had 6 tickets. And that's not, and it really doesn't have anything to do with data. It has to do with the fact that managed service providers are making sure that what they were exploiting was a patching update that wasn't done. So to outsource that, that was the reason why we only had 6 tickets, because it really wasn't an issue for anybody that was using a managed service provider. They were already 2 steps, 3 steps ahead, or even if they virtualized, doesn't even create a ticket, they could just do it. So that's more of a kind of a reason to use a company like Cumulus.
And you guys are an MSP. That's what an MSP is?
Yeah, we're a managed service provider. Technically, we're classified as a managed cloud service provider and cloud broker, which basically means we focus on cloud-based solutions. It doesn't mean we're exclusively in the cloud. We have key relationships with companies like Datto, with Google, with Microsoft. We have about 40 other active relationships with other vendors, so we can bring in the right solution and mix and match. If you need something that we don't offer, we are set up to broker it. So we'll go out and do the research, we'll vet the vendors, we'll manage them for you, we'll bring them in, and we'll pass it through to you so that you have, one axe to grind, so to speak. Although, I shouldn't use the axe analogy, see what you did to the computer with the hammer.
There's going to be a quiz about all these acronyms, MSP, RTO, RPO.
Is SMB small, medium business?
Yes,
Okay.
small, mid-size.
So you're going to pass the test.
Yes.
My question will be about ransomware, but I'm an individual small business and consultant, but I'm aspiring to someday, have a group. So I always try to keep on top of this. So the way I operate now is I have my desktop and Microsoft 365, so that's my cloud. The applications I use are cloud-based, things like Constant Contact, other cloud-based services. So if anything ever goes awry with the desktop, I run over to the other room and I do the laptop. And then if that doesn't work, I have my iPad and I have my phone. And I have had times where if the internet is down, I'll go to the laptop and I'll use a hotspot. Mm-hmm. So the ransomware question is, if I on my desktop got that, that red
scary
symbol, now that we're all multi-device, and I have OneDrive, that I can get my files everywhere. So if one of my devices, and my main workhorse is the desktop, were it to be attacked, does that shut down my other devices?
It doesn't shut down the other devices, but if your desktop is attacked and files get encrypted, and those files are in OneDrive,
yes,
then OneDrive in the cloud will have encrypted files. And if you go and try and access them from your other devices, you'll see that it's encrypted. But you won't have access to the files. Right. So in that situation, you see, and this is what we talked about, business continuity in the cloud, right? You want to protect your desktop, right? But because you're storing files in OneDrive, we also want to protect OneDrive. So that if something happens to the data that's in OneDrive, we can restore that as well.
So could you just talk a little bit about, even though that's OneDrive, I think of that as in the world I live in, right? But that ultimately is in Microsoft.
Right.
So if all a person's stuff gets contaminated and it's up in Microsoft's OneDrive, how does that get cleared out?
Well, that's what we do, right? We can come clear it out, and with a solution like Backupify, we can restore your data from someplace else back into the OneDrive environment.
Because Microsoft's not going to do it.
Microsoft's not going to do it. Microsoft has a backup of your data, but they won't give it to you because it's for them to, They're backing up in case their server fails, not in case your data is corrupted.
So in the case of sort of independent, the devices would be fine, but there's still risk at the level of.
Which is why we'd want to protect your cloud. And we're not talking, when we talk about, one person and backing up what you have in OneDrive, we're talking $4 a month. Yeah, $48 a year. For that, we prefer to bill you annually. It's a lot of invoicing, right? It's a lot of credit card transactions. Right? Okay, but
so that's a single service that you offer.
Yeah.
For that very affordable price.
Yes. So for $48 a year, and it's not just what's in OneDrive. It's all of your email messages, your calendar appointments, your contacts. I mean, one of the most, I generally don't field service calls, but occasionally, people are out, vacation, lunch, whatever, I'll catch one. Now, I couldn't tell them how to fix it. I had to hand it off to one of my smarter people. But I did answer the phone. It was a CEO who was playing with his phone on an airplane, and he sort of, he was disconnected from Wi-Fi. Somehow he deleted all of his contacts, right? Now, okay, they're in the cloud, right? So he lands, he calls, and says, his words, you did something wrong, all of my contacts are gone, right? And we're like, well, what happened? Well, I was on the plane, and I was cleaning up some contacts. I'm like, were you on the Wi-Fi? No, I never, I didn't connect to the Wi-Fi. I just was working locally on the phone. Okay, cool. Technician gets on the phone, forces the resync, boom, 15 minutes later, all of his contacts are back, right? It's worth a lot more than $48.
Well, it makes your head spin a little bit, because I hail from the days of where you had the box and stuff was in the box and you took it back. So that's like, okay,
Right.
You can avoid that by keeping everything on your box, but then you don't know if somebody's.
I'm maybe not enough gray here to show it. I go back in time long enough to know. I mean, before we did this, back in the 90s and through the mid 2000s, I had a technology consulting company, and we had a client who their backup method was to back up to an external hard drive and to take it off site once a week. They would take the hard drive and put it in their safety deposit box at the bank and take the other one, the A drive would go in and the B drive would come out. And that was awesome, because if they had to restore something, the drive was right there. If they needed something older, they'd go to the bank. If the building burnt down, they'd lose a week's worth of work, which to me seems like a lot. They were a 55-person company, right? But they had insurance that would pay for data entry people to come back, whatever. This is almost state of the art at the time, and it was safe, right? Until they had an event where their server crashed and corrupted the external drive. Okay, this happened. The crash happened at 4:45 about on a Friday afternoon. By the time they realized they weren't going to be able to restore, from that one drive, and they had to go to the safety deposit box and get the other one, the bank was closed. And Monday was Patriots Day, and their branch was closed because they were along the marathon route. And so they had to wait until Tuesday to start recovering their business. To start, right? And then, hey, USB drive, excellent. 3 gig an hour, right? Instantaneous. A whole different solution. And even when, and so if she hadn't totally smashed this up and we said, let's physically move the data from here back to here, that's going to go at 35 gig an hour, right? 10 to 15 times faster than the little USB drives that some services give you.
One of the things, just to add to that, the restore process, we've got a lot of data, it takes a long time. We're able to start the restore process while you're still in that virtualized state. So you're avoiding the downtime even on the back end. It used to be you have to do it over the weekend, you have to do it at night, send this text out. Now you're able to actually start that restore process. It's really, once it's ready, it's just a reboot of the server. So it's the downtime on the front end and the back end, the restore process.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one other question. With Microsoft Office 365 and this protection managed service that you're speaking about, is that something that Microsoft recommends? You know, what's Microsoft's position on?
Microsoft's position is that you should have backup for your data. That it's your responsibility.
Yeah, they even read on their forums and in their user agreement, they recommend, number one is recommend backing up your files. They cannot guarantee that that data is there. They don't take any responsibility for it.
Actually, I have another good deal for the, to have a MSP, to be that, it would cost you $96 a year, for us to support you on that, another $2 component.
That's unlimited support for $8 a month.
US based, everybody's either in Norwalk or Rochester.
So,
Yeah.
yes. Well, the support that comes, the Datto provided support is built into that product. What Jerry's talking about is we offer a whole range of support services where we can support your laptop and your, all your devices. We can make sure that your virus protection is current and all of that fun stuff.
You can work.
We'll make sure you can work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
We'll
coming
be hanging
out.
out and questions, so.
Please.
Thank you, Alan, for having us.
There's more breakfast outside. Please help yourself. You want to stop this?
No, I'm not sure.
I'm standing here, and it's like